Thank you for joining the team at Hands-On Labs today for the second part of our webinar series, Teach Science from a Social Distance. We are excited to take our attendees on a comprehensive tour of our award-winning e-learning platform, HOL Cloud. Before I hand the mic over to our host, let's take a moment to review the webinar logistics and give a brief overview of what to expect today. We encourage our attendees to participate in the conversation by asking questions and sharing resources. Please use the chat function to join the conversation. If you'd like the entire group to see your comment or question, please be sure to toggle the window to all panelists and attendees. If you have questions for our host today, please type them in the Q&A box. You can find this section in your toolbar. We also have several distance learning specialists on the panel today to help answer any questions you have in real time. For questions pertaining to kit cost and customization, please work directly with your dedicated distance learning specialist once the webinar concludes. We will try to answer your questions in real time. However, Dr. Duane will address any remaining questions in detail at the conclusion of his presentation. At any point in this conversation, you can raise your virtual hand and our distance learning specialist will send you a private chat message to support your needs. In just a moment, we'll be asking you to participate in a poll before we dive into the demo today. To participate, please submit your response when you see the poll pop up on your screens throughout this introduction. I'll be sure to announce when we launch the poll in just a moment. Everyone here today will receive a follow-up email by the end of the day that will include a recording of the webinar and additional resources for you to reference moving forward. So what can you expect to see today? During our demo today, Dr. Duane Cagle will take you on a deep dive into our award-winning HOL Cloud. During this technology tour, he will demonstrate how our robust e-learning platform allows instructors to effortlessly bring their science lab online with features like LTI integration, custom lesson authoring, and auto-grading, and so much more. It's time for our first poll question. Please refer to the pop-up on your screen and answer the best that best describes your familiarity with HOL Cloud. All right, it looks like we have a majority of you guys here today that are not familiar with the HOL Cloud. This is the perfect opportunity to learn a little bit more, and I appreciate you participating. Before the fun begins, I'd like to introduce our main host today, Dr. Duane Cagle. He is our Chief Resident Scientist and has been the brains behind the Hands-On Labs curriculum development for the past 9 years. When he's not in the lab testing experimental hypotheses, you can find Dr. D on the slopes shredding some snow or practicing his serve on the tennis courts. Without further ado, please give a warm welcome to our host, Dr. Duane Cagle.
Thank you, Amanda, for the warm welcome, and we certainly thank all of our attendees today for taking time out of what I'm sure is a busy teaching schedule that you have going on this fall term. So due to the results of the poll, I want to split our time today. I was originally going to just spend time showing you instructor tools and functionality of our course delivery platform that allow you to easily integrate it into your existing course. But since so many of you are not quite familiar with what we do and how we design our curriculum, I wanted to take just a brief amount of time to give you a preview of how we design lessons so that then when I show you the instructor tools, things will make a little more sense. So what you're seeing right now is a landing page on our curriculum hosting platform called HOL Cloud. And this is going to be the same landing page for a student or an instructor. This happens to be a microbiology course, and you can see that there are, for this particular instance, 4 prerequisite exercises that students must complete before gaining access to the curriculum proper for their course, which is designated in blue on this landing page. So before we talk about any instructor tools or anything like that, let's take a look at a lesson. Now you'll notice when we click on a lesson title that it appears with 3 sections. Now, yes, there are actually 4 tabs here because the exercise section has a couple of activities for the student. But overall, lessons are always in 3 labeled sections, which are exploration, then exercises, and then finally evaluation. And for students, each of these sections is gated. That means they have to complete them in order. So students cannot merely jump to the final exam for a particular lab and answer a series of questions unless they have first completed the exploration section and the exercises. So let's take a look at how we design each of these sections. An exploration section is always going to begin with a detailed time allocation statement for the student. This assures that the student can budget their time accordingly to be successful with the procedures and the exam portion of the lesson. Typically, our labs take about 3 hours to complete. However, in this instance, such as microbiology, the student may have an overnight or even couple of day incubation period before they see their results. After a student reviews the time allocation, they are presented with the learning objectives for this section. Our learning objectives are modeled after Bloom's taxonomy. So you'll see verbs beginning each statement, and these verbs, examples of them are describe, discuss, explain. Now the verbiage does become more active and more advanced for the subsequent sections of the lab. But for the exploration, it is just an overview of important topics that a student should understand. And so those learning objectives are going to be a little more basic. Now, before a student engages with the content proper, they take a pre-test, which is labeled Test Your Knowledge. And when they click on this tab, they are presented with a series of drag and drop questions. And these questions are specifically designed to test a student's inbound knowledge of the subject matter covered in the lab. Once a student makes their selections, they're provided with feedback so they can identify any knowledge gaps that they have before proceeding. Typically, there are more than one of these drag and drop formative assessments for the student to complete before they gain access to the exploration content. Now, all of our exploration content is very purposefully designed. It consists of manageable blocks of text with all important terms in bold, always accompanied by graphic representations of those concepts. So here we see a photograph of some mold growing on an agar plate and being identified as the producers of penicillin. Also, at the bottom of many exploration pages, the student will encounter Did You Know panels. And these panels are designed so that a student can relate the information that has been presented on that particular content page to ideas they should already be familiar with. Lastly, at the bottom of content pages are these blue question time activities. And students complete these by answering a series of multiple choice questions that are directly related to the content that has just been presented on that page. So students can monitor their learning progress as they continue throughout the exploration section. Now, again, once students make their selections, they are provided with feedback so they can identify, yet again, any knowledge gaps that may remain. There may be one or more multiple choice or true-false type questions at the bottom of each page. And then all subsequent content pages are arrayed similarly to the first page that we have viewed. Again, manageable blocks of text, always accompanied by graphic representations, and then finally a series of questions at the bottom of the page. Once a student completes the exploration section, they are then prepared to begin the physical exercises for this laboratory. The overview page will remind the student of how much time they should budget, again, to be successful. And it will also present them with the learning objectives for this section. You'll notice, as promised, these are more advanced outcomes, such as perform, measure, and relate. The student will then review all the materials to have on hand that will be used in the procedures. And if you're not familiar with our company or our curriculum, we provide science grade materials for students to conduct hands-on activities that mimic and mirror those activities performed by their on-campus peers. So if we're talking microbiology, students are going to work with non-virulent strains of microbes to gain both practice and experience with traditional laboratory procedures for, in this instance, they're performing Kirby-Bauer diffusion test, but any variety of aseptic techniques and diagnostic procedures in the microbiology discipline. Once a student retrieves the items from their kit, they are ready to begin the procedures. And just like the exploration content, we design the experimentation content in a very purposeful manner, in that we design the steps to be very clearly written. You'll notice they always start with the verb, and usually only one sentence. So the student can easily understand the sequence of events they're expected to complete. Whenever possible, we also provide video support for students. In this instance, how to pour an agar plate. So any common laboratory techniques, students can watch a video to familiarize themselves before proceeding with the experiment. Also interspersed throughout the procedures will be photographs to visually guide a student on how to be successful. A disadvantage that remote science laboratory students have compared to their own campus peers is they can't raise their hands when they have a question. So it's imperative that we visually guide those students to reduce the amount of questions that might occur when conducting the procedures. We also provide students with easy access to record their experimental outcomes, whether it's with descriptions, photo uploads, or data table proper, so they can record measurements in this case. So very easy for a student to record the outcomes of the procedures, all within this digital environment. And then at the conclusion of the procedures, students have an opportunity to answer a series of open-ended questions where they relate their experimental outcomes to the topics central to the laboratory. Many labs consist of more than one exercise. This particular lab consists of students performing a Kirby-Bauer diffusion test with Staphylococcus epidermidis and 3 different antibiotics, and then also viewing a prepared slide of the actual penicillium mold and its reproductive structures. Again, students upload images of labeled images of the slide they viewed and answer a series of open-ended questions. The final section of the lab is titled Evaluation. And as promised, this is a final exam for all the information presented in this particular lab, including the exploration content, the procedures, and the outcomes that a student should have achieved from conducting the experiment. Typically, the evaluation section consists of roughly a dozen multiple choice questions. Once a student answers these questions, they are again provided with immediate feedback. The main difference with these questions compared to the multiple choice questions that the student would have completed earlier is that once a student begins this final exam, they are locked out of the content, meaning they can't exit out of the exam and then come back to it. They have to complete it in one setting, and again, they cannot page back through the lab to look for the answer. So this is truly testing the students' comprehension of all the key components of this lab exercise. Once a student completes, they are again provided with immediate feedback. And then they have an opportunity, once they can then review their answers with the feedback, to answer what we call an extension question. And an extension question is designed for a student to apply the knowledge gained from conducting the lab to address a new problem, something that they haven't encountered yet. So in this particular instance, the students, as mentioned, use step epi in a series of antibiotics, and they're provided with the question of what would have happened, or what would their predictions be if the microbe being tested had been E. coli. E. coli is another standard microbe that we provide in our kits. So students should already be familiar with this microbe, and then if they can apply their knowledge of how these antibiotics work, and apply their knowledge of the structure of E. coli, they should be able to successfully answer this question. So that's an overview of our curriculum. So I want to catch everyone up to speed. So now when I show you the instructor tools that we have integrated into our course delivery platform, it'll make more sense because you'll understand how they're being used with the pre-existing curriculum. So let's go back to our lesson list that we already have seen and look at a couple of things that instructors can do on this landing page for their students. First of all, you'll see in this brown highlighted rectangle that instructors can include dated and time-stamped information for their students to encounter anytime they log on to their lab manual course platform. So it could be as simple as a welcome message at the beginning of a semester, or a weekly update message reminding students when assignments are due. Anything you want to communicate with your students once they log on to their lab manual, you can type that here and click save, and it will immediately then appear for your students. You'll notice again, it does have a date stamp. You also have the opportunity as an instructor to change the order of lessons in your lab course. And very easy to do. All you do is drag and drop the titles to the order that you prefer. And now this is the order they will appear in for your students. So once you have left any welcome messages for your students, adjusted this sequence of the labs that your students will complete, we have given you more tools within any given lesson to really customize the content to best meet the needs of your course. So if we go back into this lesson that we've already viewed, as an instructor on any of the content pages, you will encounter a pulsing blue bar between a graphic element and a text panel. And in any of these blue bars, you have the opportunity to add additional content in the form of text, And you'll notice as I hit submit on that now this appears in a beige color. And it'll appear in beige for your students likewise. This will immediately draw their attention to any supplemental content that you have added to the existing course. You can go in and edit this content at any time. It is a live environment. It will push to your students immediately, or you can remove it if you so desire. You'll also have the opportunity to add images, and you can either search for those images on your computing device, or you should be able to drag and drop files more quickly, and we'll see if they'll upload. There they go. And then you can scale them to size to determine how large they appear in relation to the text content that is already on the page. And then we can save that. You can introduce a caption. You can provide alternative text for the visually impaired if you would like. And if your images have a copyright that you need to apply, you can certainly add that too. Again, once I save my image, it's going to appear in beige compared to the standard image here that is in a white background. The last tool we give you as far as uploading supplemental content is to add a video. Same situation as we've just seen with the image. You can drag and drop an MP4 formatted video file, and then it will immediately appear for your students. So, you know, if you have a documentary or something that either you produced or you have found about a topic that's being covered in the lab manual, you could easily upload that here in the exploration section, or we can progress to the experimentation section. And maybe you wanted to add a supplemental video, not unlike ones we already have, that maybe is taping you, their instructor, performing the procedures. So you could really set up a nice visual demo for your students. Again, on these procedural pages, you will see the pulsing blue bars, and you have the same options: text, images, or videos. You can add throughout the procedures. So again, this really lets you customize the views that your students have of the content and really personalize this lab manual to best meet the needs of your students in your course overall. We have designed some even more exciting tools to allow you to customize content, and I'm going to show you that in just a moment. But first, let's return back to the landing page, and then also what we call the course dashboard for instructors. So this is kind of your quick status view of your course as a whole. You'll see in this particular section, in this quick view at the bottom, that we have the names of all the students that are enrolled. Now, in this course, they're all celebrities. You're probably not going to be so fortunate to have such famous students, but anyway, we lucked out here in our demo course. What this is showing us, though, seriously, is that here are all the lessons that appear as ovals by the student's name, and then the completed lessons appear in green. So our first student, Snoop Dogg, we can see has completed all but one of his assignments, and that assignment that he has not completed yet is in gray, which means he's currently working on that lab. Now, his 4 classmates have completed 8 of 9 labs, and they have not started the biochemical testing lab. So that's your quick reference at that. If you had more students in the class and it was difficult to scroll through, you could get some quick analytics by just clicking on a particular lab title, and it would show you the whole class where students were as far as what section of that particular lab the students in your course had completed. You can also view student progress by time spent on task. is another bar graph here. And again, you can break that down by lesson title. You can also view a more detailed list and information about the students in your course, such as not only their names, but what email address they use to register for the course, and very importantly, when the last time they logged on to the course and lab manual platform. So if you have a student that you fear is falling behind, maybe they haven't been submitting their labs in a timely manner, you can go into this view and look and see, when did that student last log on? You know, have they just quit trying altogether? So forth and so on. But this gives you some quick, a quick view of your students and when the last time they accessed your course. It also gives you the ability to remove a student from your laboratory course, should you choose to do that by clicking the X button by their name. So what else can we do as an instructor to quickly view things about our lab manual and the students that are engaged with it? Well, we have a few more tabs over here. We have a materials tab. This tab is available to your students too when they log in, and it just gives you a quick view of all the physical materials that students will be using to complete the titles in your course. So if you see something on here that you think is noteworthy and you want to call it out to your students ahead of time, instead of having to go through each lesson and then look for the materials tables in the lessons, you have an assimilated list of all of the materials for all of the titles in your course. Let's go back up to the top of the page and use our tab again. We give you the ability also to quickly preview and download any supplemental documents that have already been included for your students. So for example, in this microbiology course, students already have access to a file of how to assemble and use the microscope that they have an option of purchasing in conjunction with their kit. Not only do we include video support for pouring agar plates, we also provide students with a step-by-step instructional document they can print and have handy on their workspace if they so choose. And then lastly, we provided your students with an FAQ document. You know, being micro and not being on campus and able to ask and receive answers quickly, some common questions that students may ask, we've compiled in a document and students can review that at any time. But you, the instructor, can upload additional course documents if you would like. The benefit of adding a supplemental file for students is that they do indeed have the ability to download and print that file. So if there is something you want students to have printed in conjunction with their course materials, you can always upload that file as a PDF, a Word doc, an image, and so forth here in this Dropbox. We provide you, the instructor, with detailed answer guides to all those open-ended questions that students encounter at the end of the exercises. You saw those answers had already been populated when we looked through the curriculum just a couple moments ago. But again, if you wanted a printed and hard copy of all of those answers, we do make those available to you under the Answer Guide tab. However, more importantly, we offer those integrated into our Gradebook tool for you, the instructor. And we're going to take a little deep dive into Gradebook and how you set up grading for your course, how you manually grade things, but more importantly, how you prepare the system to auto-grade a huge percentage of the questions that your students will complete. But before we do that, we're about at the halfway point, and I want to take a quick break as we normally do and answer any questions that may have come up that our panelists were unable to answer. We'll only do that for just a minute or two, and then we'll take a closer look at our gradebook tool. And then that's going to be followed, I just want to let you know, by LTI integration services and capabilities with this platform and your existing learning management system. And then lastly, but not leastly, how you have the ability as an instructor to custom author an entire lab or multiple labs to integrate in with existing titles into the student's lab manual. But again, let's just take a quick break. I'll answer any questions and then we'll dive back into this.
Hey, Dr. D, it's Amanda. Tamara Loveday has a question. When you upload a picture or video, is alt text automatically added to photos and closed captioning added to the videos we upload, or do we have to add that on our own?
Thank you so much for the question. That's a great one. You will need to add that on your own. The system doesn't have the capability to read your image or video to create that text document file. So you will need to upload that. And you'll notice when I drag and drop that image when we were doing the demo just a couple minutes ago, that panel labeled alt text was not populated. So that's something I need to do not only as an instructor with the tools I've just shown you, but also as an author myself. When I'm creating content for students, I do need to manually upload the alt text files. But that's a great question. Thank you so much for asking it.
Thank you, Dr. D. I'm just checking our one other chat to see if we have any other questions at this point. That's the only question that our panelists have not been able to answer yet.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you, Amanda.
Absolutely.
All right, well, as promised, let's take a look at the gradebook. Now, we've seen at the top of this panel something that looks similar already, where it's a list of student names and the progress ovals by their names. The difference on this one is we see something in yellow with a number beside of it. And this is an example of that I, the instructor, have gone in and assigned a manual point value for questions that could not be auto-graded. So if I, the instructor, see a number here inside this oval, it means all grading is completed for that particular student for that particular lab. If it's green, it just simply means the student has submitted their work, but I have not assigned a final grade. And then we've already seen examples of the gray and the white ovals, meaning their labs in progress or not begun yet. But what I really want to draw your attention to on this page is this lesson titles and point values per lesson. So this is assuming I've gone in and I've created point values for individual questions. And this shows the total points that a student can achieve when completing all questions for each of these titles. So how do I get to that point as an instructor? Well, I need to select a particular lab title. And in this case, we'll do the one we've been looking at, which is the antibiotic sensitivity lab. And then for every question in that lab, I need to assign a point value. The default, as we can see here, is just 1 point per question. That's how these get delivered to you, the instructor. But you can then go in and change the point values for any and all questions as you desire. So if you recall, the TYK stands for Test Your Knowledge. These are those drag and drop formative assessments. You may opt to not grade those at all since they're formative assessments, and you can certainly do that. Conversely, these Q time, if you remember, stand for question time. Those occur at the bottom of each of the content pages. Those are the multiple choice questions. You might want to give them more than 1 point value since they are testing the student's comprehension of the concepts as they're introduced. and then so forth and so on. The experimentation, you may recall, consists of image upload panels, data tables, and then those open-ended questions at the end of the exercises. You may want to assign more point values to those discussion type questions. Data tables, maybe you don't want to grade a data table. It's totally up to you. But the point is, you're going to go in and set this up, this grading rubric that's going to best fit the needs for your course. Once you've done that, the system is going to auto-grade your students with a couple of exceptions. It's going to auto-grade all of these drag and drop questions. It's going to auto-grade all of these multiple choice questions. And then lastly, it's going to auto-grade that final exam. So you can see most of the questions that your students are answering, all that you ever had to do was back in the beginning is determine the point value for those questions. And then the system is going to take care of the grading for you. The only manual grading that you're going to need to perform is for the exercises themselves, because they consist of image panels, data tables, and discussion questions. Again, you could elect not to grade some of those elements if you didn't want to, but if you do, then you are going to need to manually grade each student's response. So what does that look like? Well, what we do is we will go to an exercise, and here we'll see again, the suggested answers for students. So here's a completed Curry-Bauer diffusion plate test with zones of inhibition around the antibiotic disc. Here are the measurements that students were expected to make of those zones of inhibition. And then here are the discussion questions and the answers to those. Once I have this open, I can then go in and click on a student and look at the work that they have submitted for each of those, and then assign them a grade for each of those questions or data. So this is all contained within this cloud environment. You don't have to download those answer keys that I showed you earlier unless you just want to, because the integrated answer key is going to appear with each of these questions within the Gradebook tool itself. So that's an example of Gradebook. And again, this just returns back to the page. Now, once you save this grading rubric for all the questions and all the labs in your course, it's going to transfer automatically every semester. So don't look at this and think, oh no, this is so time consuming, I have to set this up every term that I teach. No, you don't. You set it up once, and unless you need to change it, you don't need to touch it again. So very, very straightforward in that regard. Let's talk a little bit about LTI, and then we'll wrap up and then we'll get the most interesting part, which is the custom lesson authoring. So we do offer learning technology integration services, both in the form of self-help tutorials within our system that are available for you, the instructor, and your IT team. But we also have human support for you and your team should they need it. But let's look at the options that are available to integrate our digital lab manual into your learning technology management system. The most basic, and really no integration at all, but the most basic way you can share information about the lab manual and give access to the lab manual to your students is just copying the student enrollment link and pasting it either in your LMS or via some kind of communication method directly to your students. Once they then click that link, they gain access to the lab manual platform. They'll create a login the first time they do it. And after that, they can easily return to complete their assignment. However, we know most of you would prefer this be a more seamless experience for your students with your existing course, and we have certainly made that available. So each one of our groups of lessons comes with a litany of course hooks and lesson hooks based on the level of integration that you wish to achieve within your existing learning management system. So it could be as simple as just providing an overall course hook within your LMS. So students merely just accessed our lab manual through your learning management system, but then they accessed it as a whole, as we saw with the welcome page and all the lessons at once. Or you can individually break up the lessons from our lab manual and integrate them within the lecture portion for each of those topics in your learning management system. So again, your students in your learning management environment, you're talking about antibiotics, that particular lecture session, and then the student clicks on the antibiotics lab and they're there. They don't have to re-log in or anything. And that also works with porting the gradebook functionality directly into your learning management system. Meaning, you know, if the students' auto-graded questions port over and any manual grading that you've done will also port into your learning management system. Again, we provide you with all the resources to set this up and are happy to answer questions that you may have beyond that. So let's go out of this page and back to our home page. So the last thing we want to talk about, and we get a lot of questions about this, is custom lesson authoring. And as promised, we give you the opportunity to create your own unique titles and student exercises, student exams, background content, whatever you want to do by using this custom lesson authoring tool. Now, what we'll see on this landing page for the custom lesson authoring portal are the labs that are already in your course that we have placed there, and then the ability to create additional labs. So here we have a custom lesson that we started. So I'm not going to create a tab, we already started one. But you'll see when we open it, we haven't done anything other than just give it a fictitious title. So you literally start with a clean slate, and you have all the tools that I do as a content developer at HOL. So meaning that you can go in and set the time allocation for your students. You can create learning objectives here, as many as you want or as few. And just as importantly is you can create drag and drop formative assessments for your students to complete before they begin your lab. And you have all the options that we do. So you can use matching questions that we saw earlier. You could use categorization questions. You could do image drag and drop, where basically you would put labels on an image and then students would move those labels around to the correct locations. We offer a variety of chemistry functions on here if you teach a chemistry course. Or lastly, a sequencing question where it's a series of statements and the student drags and drops them into the right order. Now, I'm not going to go through building one of these questions. There's a lot of functionality for each question that you can input as the author of that question. And again, we have resources for you. So to answer any questions you have about building these activities for your students, and are happy to support you as needed. And then for content itself, you also have a clean slate. So you can title each of your exploration content pages, and then you can enter text here. You can drag and drop photo panels where you want images to appear. You can drag and drop video panels where you want to upload video files for your students. You can drag and drop also various other tools. We have some simulations pre-built into our platform that are discipline specific. And you can also link your students out to a third party if you have found any information that you want students to visit outside the lab manual environment by providing direct links for your students. But again, you can create a page exactly like you saw in our demo of existing curriculum pages, or you can create a page that's just a subset of those functions and effects. And then lastly, at the bottom, you can add as many questions as you would like. Again, these are always multiple choice or true false that will appear at the bottom of the page to test your students' understanding of the content that you have built for them. And then I'm not going to go through as in much detail these other sections, but you have control and options to build all three sections of a lab, just like you saw in the demo portion today. So you can create a time allocation for the experiment part. You can upload or add, I should say, your learning objectives. And again, you can make as many or as few of those as you choose. And then lastly, on an exercise page, just as we saw before, you can give it a title. You can give some introductory information for that exercise, and then you can create those step-by-step procedures to mimic what we've done in other lessons if you would like. You can add photos and videos, again, if you wish. And then at the bottom of each of those pages, you can create your own open-ended discussion questions for students to relate their experimental outcomes to the topics central to your custom lab. And then lastly, you can create a final exam for your students by building as many of these multiple choice or true false auto-graded questions as you want, and also by including one or more of those open-ended discussion extension questions that you want. Now, really how you design a custom lesson is up to you. While we have a basic template built into the system, you don't have to use all the tools within that template. So maybe you only wanted to create an exam for your students, and maybe you wanted to make it like a true lab practical. So it was a final exam that covered all the labs that your students completed. You could go in and then just use the evaluation section. And maybe you wanted to build 50 questions instead of a dozen. That's your opportunity to do that. Conversely, if you wanted to create just an exploration section without an activity for the student or without a final exam, you can go in that and just build introductory content if that's all you choose to do. So really, this is open for you to use. Again, once you save it, you have an opportunity then to, on the saved lesson, if I had published this, I can then drag and drop it and intersperse it where I want it to fall within the sequence of my existing lessons. And it's there from semester to semester. So kind of like you set up your grading rubric originally, once you've created your custom lesson, it's there for you to use in the future. So let's go back. And there's one other topic we didn't talk about. I realize it's not important to everyone in our audience today because unless it's a life science, you're probably going to have no need for a microscope, but we usually have interest in this. We have built within our lab manual platform, HOL Cloud, a virtual microscope for your students. So if you're teaching a life science discipline that requires microscopy We can provide your students with class-prepared slides and the option to purchase a microscope if they don't already have one, and conduct, traditional procedures with a compound light microscope. However, if your main concern is that students just learn how to focus and download captured images, then we have built a digital/virtual microscope that is available throughout our curriculum. And if you elect for your students to use that, it will appear on that drop-down tab menu that I called it up just now, just like it has for us here in the demo. It is fully functioning microscope, meaning students are not just clicking on images and viewing them. Students actually have to use the microscope. So, and we do give them a little cheat sheet here on the side in case they get stuck. But, students need to turn on a light source. Students must lower the stage before they can initially place a slide on it. Once the student gets the green checks here, they are ready to view a slide. We have over 100 slides in our library. All of these slides coincide with our curriculum. So all these slides are called out in the appropriate lab manual exercises. So a student merely, if it says look at an amoeba whole mount, then they're going to select the amoeba whole mount slide here. Once the student selected that, they have the opportunity to focus on that image by using the slider, or they can also use the up and down arrows. There's a fine focus knob on this microscope, and then very importantly, they can change the objective lenses to magnify that image. Once they have achieved the level of focus and they have centered that image, by the way, they are able to pan. Once they've centered that image, a student can download it as a file. And then if you recall, there are image upload panels within the lab manual for students to submit their work. So it's just a matter of students downloading the image to their computing device and then drag and dropping that image within the appropriate receptacle in their lab manual. And then they submitted their work at that point in time. We do give the student labeling tools in the platform. If they were, for example, told to label a vacuole or a nuclei in this amoeba cell, so they can easily have all those integrated tools on the platform. They do not need third-party software to complete any lab activities. So I've successfully used up most of our time today, and I really want to answer any questions that you may have. So I am going to turn this back over to our host, and she will relay any questions that have not been answered thus far, and we can have an open discussion until the expiration of our time coming up here in about 7 minutes. Thank you so much for your participation today. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
So unless we have any last minute questions come in, we were actually able to answer everything already, Dr. D. I really appreciate you taking the time to do such an in-depth and thorough walkthrough of the HOL Cloud. I'm just going to give it maybe 1 more minute if you guys have any further questions, anything that you're still typing. All right. Doesn't seem like we have anything. I just want to say thank you to you all one more time for joining us on this webinar. If you think of any questions in the future, or if you have questions when we send out our end of day email, please know that your dedicated representative will be reaching out to you as well, probably within the next 24 to 48 hours. You can also submit those questions that you think of after this. You can submit them to our website and our reps will reach out to you right away. So again, please keep an eye out for our follow-up email that'll include the resources, the recording, and a big thank you to our panelists today. And most importantly, a bigger thanks to all of you, because without you guys continuing to educate the scientists of tomorrow, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing today. So please stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you guys again next time.